The moment Jace Velaryon disappeared beneath the waters of the Gullet, the war changed forever. For 2 seasons, Jace has been one of the most important pieces on Rhaenyra's side of the board. He wasn't just her son, he wasn't just her heir. He represented the future of House Targaryen itself, and now he's gone. What's even more devastating is that this wasn't supposed to happen. The Blacks came into the Battle of the Gullet with the advantage. Corlys Velaryon had the strategy. Baela and Moondancer controlled the skies. The Triarchy fleet was exactly where they wanted it. For a brief moment, it looked like Rhaenyra's forces were on the verge of securing one of the most important victories of the entire war, and then everything fell apart. One mistake, one unexpected dragon, one split-second decision from Jace himself. And suddenly, the future heir to the Iron Throne is sinking beneath the waves, while arrows rain down around him. Today we're breaking down everything that happened in House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 1, including the Battle of the Gullet, Corlys, strategy, the Triarchy's attack, why the Blacks technically won while still suffering a devastating loss, and what Jace's death could mean for Rhaenyra moving forward. But before we jump in, spoiler warning. If you haven't watched the episode yet, now is your chance to fly away faster than Vhagar chasing an unfortunate family member. And while you're escaping, make sure to hit subscribe. Seriously. I spent hours researching this episode, digging through lore, production details, interviews, and battle breakdowns so you don't have to. So if you enjoy deep dives like this, help this video reach more House of the Dragon fans by liking, sharing, and subscribing. The algorithm is basically a dragon at this point. If we don't keep feeding it, it starts burning villages. Now let's talk about that battle. The battle itself is where the episode truly starts flexing its muscles. One thing House of the Dragon has always done well is showing that wars aren't won by brute force alone. They're won through planning, timing, and understanding your opponent. Corlys Velaryon understands this better than almost anyone in Westeros. The Sea Snake has spent his entire life commanding fleets, surviving impossible situations, and outmaneuvering enemies who underestimated him. So when the Triarchy finally appears on the horizon, Corlys doesn't panic. He immediately starts thinking several moves ahead. What makes this sequence so effective is that both sides feel dangerous. Shirako Lohar isn't some disposable villain designed to lose. The episode goes out of its way to establish her as a capable commander with a real strategy. She understands that defeating the Velaryon blockade could completely change the course of the war, and for a while it genuinely looks like she might pull it off. The sea becomes a battlefield of fire. Crashing wood, dragonflame, and chaos. Every direction feels dangerous. Every ship feels vulnerable. It creates that feeling Game of Thrones battles are famous for, where victory and disaster are separated by only a few seconds. What I found especially interesting is how Jace approaches the battle. Throughout the episode, he's constantly acting as the voice of caution. Earlier, he questioned Alicent's offer. He warns that everything could be a trap. He repeatedly demonstrates good judgment. In many ways, Episode 1 quietly shows us why he was such a strong choice as Rhaenyra's heir. Unlike some members of his family, Jace doesn't rush blindly toward glory. He thinks. He evaluates risks. He understands consequences. That's why his death hurts even more. This isn't a reckless prince making a foolish mistake. This is arguably one of the smartest people on Team Black getting caught in a situation that spirals beyond anyone's control. Sometimes in war, doing everything right still isn't enough. That's the tragedy sitting at the center of this episode. Jace's downfall doesn't come because he's incompetent. It comes because the battlefield becomes completely unpredictable. And then we get to Rhaenyra and Sheepstealer. Honestly, this might be the most important moment in the entire episode. At first glance, it looks like another exciting dragon arrival. The audience sees a dragon entering the fight, and naturally assumes reinforcements have arrived. But when the second Sheepstealer starts attacking indiscriminately, everything changes. Suddenly, nobody controls the situation anymore. Dragons are often described as weapons, but House of the Dragon constantly reminds us that they aren't swords or catapults. They're living creatures with instincts, fears, and tempers. Sheepstealer doesn't care about battle plans. Sheepstealer doesn't care about formations. Sheepstealer doesn't care who is supposed to win. The dragon introduces pure chaos into a battle that was being carefully managed by experienced commanders. Looking back, it's almost symbolic of the entire Dance of the Dragons. Everyone believes they can control these creatures, but eventually the dragons remind everyone that they answer to nobody completely. The heartbreaking part is that Jace's final decision says everything about who he is as a character. When he realizes the writer is Rhaenyra, he hesitates. He pulls back. He chooses mercy over survival. In another story, that decision might have been celebrated as heroic. Here, it's fatal. That's what makes the scene so devastating. Jace isn't killed because he lacks courage. He isn't killed because he's weaker than his enemies. He's killed because he refuses to sacrifice his own family. That single choice creates the opening the enemy needs. Vermax gets dragged down, Jace ends up in the water, the arrows start flying, and just like that, one of the most important figures in the war is gone. It's the kind of death that lingers because it feels preventable. Viewers immediately start asking themselves the same question. What if Jace had attacked? What if Rhaenyra had never arrived? What if Sheepstealer had remained in the Vale? But that's exactly why the moment works. Tragedy is often built on what-ifs, and this episode leaves us with plenty of them. Of course, the biggest question coming out of this episode isn't who won the Battle of the Gullet. Technically, we already know that answer. The Blacks destroyed the Triarchy fleet, protected the blockade, and prevented one of the Green's most important plans from succeeding. On paper, that's a victory. But nobody is going to remember this battle as a victory. They're going to remember it as the battle where Jace Velaryon died. That's the cruel reality of war. History doesn't always care about tactical success. It remembers the moments that change people. And make no mistake, Jace's death changes everything. The heir to Rhaenyra's claim is gone. One of her most trusted advisors is gone. One of the few voices capable of balancing emotion with reason is gone. Even before we see Rhaenyra's reaction, we can already understand how devastating this loss will be. This wasn't just another casualty. This was the future she had spent years fighting to protect. What's fascinating is how close Rhaenyra was to finally achieving her goal before all of this happened. At the beginning of the episode, she can practically see the Iron Throne within reach. Alicent's deal appears to be working. Aemond is away from King's Landing. Vhagar isn't guarding the city. The Greens are divided. For the first time in a very long time, the war seems to be moving decisively in Rhaenyra's favor. The tragedy is that victory arrives at the exact same moment as devastating loss. Imagine finally reaching the destination you've sacrificed everything for, only to discover that the person you wanted to share it with is no longer there. That's the emotional position Rhaenyra now finds herself in. Even if she takes King's Landing tomorrow, it won't feel the way she imagined. The cost has become impossible to ignore. And that brings us to what may be the most important question heading into episode 2. Will Rhaenyra still be thinking like a queen, or will she start thinking like a grieving mother? Because those are two very different people. A queen looks at the board and calculates her next move. A grieving mother looks for someone to blame. House of the Dragon has repeatedly shown us what happens when personal grief begins driving political decisions. Viserys tried to avoid conflict because of grief. Daemon often embraces violence because of grief. Aemond is shaped by childhood resentment and loss. Now Rhaenyra stands at a similar crossroads. Does she push forward and take King's Landing while the opportunity still exists? Or does she become consumed by what happened at the Gullet? If she hesitates for too long, everything could unravel. Aemond will eventually return, Vhagar will return, and the advantage she currently possesses could disappear overnight. Then there's the Rhaenyra problem, and I honestly think this storyline could explode over the next few episodes. Right now, most people involved in the battle probably don't know exactly what happened. They saw a wild dragon attacking friend and foe alike. They saw chaos erupt in the sky. They saw Vermax fall. But eventually the truth is going to come out. Eventually someone will discover that the rider was Rhaenyra. And when that happens, the emotional fallout could be enormous. Whether it's fair or not, there will be people who connect Jace's death directly to her actions. That's what makes this situation so tragic. Rhaenyra wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She wasn't betraying her family. She genuinely believed she was helping. Yet her decision may end up carrying consequences almost as severe as intentional betrayal. The best tragedies happen when good intentions lead to terrible outcomes, and that's exactly what we have here. There's also a deeper theme running underneath the entire episode that I don't think enough people are talking about. The Battle of the Gullet feels like the moment the Dance of the Dragon stops being a war over succession and starts becoming a war of survival. Early in the conflict, characters still believed there would be something left to rule when the fighting ended. They still talked about inheritance, legitimacy, and political advantage. But look at where we are now. Dragons are dying, heirs are dying, fleets are burning, families are tearing themselves apart. The kingdom itself is bleeding. At some point, the Iron Throne stops looking like a prize and starts looking like a curse. Every episode pushes the story further in that direction, and episode the first of may be the clearest example yet. Everyone wants power, but the closer they get to it, the more they lose. And that's why I think Jace's death could end up being one of the defining moments of the entire series. Not because of the battle itself, but because of what comes afterward. His death removes one of the most stable and level-headed figures from Team Black. It leaves an emotional wound in Rhaenyra that may never fully heal. It creates new tensions within her own family. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds everyone watching that nobody is safe anymore. If Jace can die here, then absolutely anyone can die moving forward. That's the feeling House of the Dragon leaves us with as the credits roll. Not excitement, not triumph, dread. Because if this is how the season begins, what horrors are waiting for us next?